everybody. You might wonder what a hospital consultant is doing at a primary care conference, but in fact I'm representing acute medicine, which is a very new concept for our healthcare service, and I'd like to say that I'm advocating on behalf of primary care in the acute hospital care, because I think this is where it's at. This is the business of acute medicine, and for too long I think it has been left behind at the expense of the development of specialty medicine. I hope and endeavour to show you and demonstrate today that there is a new way of doing business, that it is efficient, effective, will provide quality care for our patient, and in fact is a much better service for those patients and for primary care, who I feel are really very much at the coalface. So what I'm advocating on behalf of primary care is a partnership with the acute hospital sector, which has been very much, separated from the development of primary care. And what I want to do is just re-engage and reinforce and foster that relationship once more. As we are aware, there is a worldwide crisis out there with increasing numbers of medical admissions arriving at hospital doors. This is not only for the UK and Ireland, but is, in Australia, in America, and hence the development of acute medicine as a very much a new fledgling specialty. The traditional model, which served general practice, I would admit, very well in the 70s and the 80s, where GPs were empowered and were very much partners in relationship with the local acute hospital. But again, the numbers were small, the demands on acute care were not the same, and now the expectation is immense, particularly in primary care and particularly at the acute hospital. There's also, on the back of all of this, there's the growth of the older old, which, the demands of care for this patient group is very high. Over 1/3 of the presentations currently to the acute hospital, and I would suggest that that's an underestimate, are accounting for 50% of the bed days. So this population group is set to grow, and they have multiple comorbidities. And quite honestly, the specialty model, which has grown and enlarged beyond belief over the last decade, where the single organ was the attractive specialty to perform, very much left the so-called unselected medical take to general practice and to the coalface, in the sense of in a very much a limbo state. So hence, I suppose I'm here to represent acute medicine and look at that. I suppose there's nothing that focuses the mind more than our current ED crisis. And I actually feel quite emotional about this, and hence my role as an acute physician. Why did I move from being a geriatrician to acute physician? Because who I saw on those trolleys was actually the older, frail, elderly patient. Huge numbers in our local hospital here in CUH, where there was at least 30 on occasion and up to 50 patients on trolleys in a very tight, confined area. I suppose from a pastoral point of view, irrespective of your clinical competency, to look at this on a day in, day out basis was just totally and wholly unacceptable. But it became the norm because nobody could find the solution, because capacity was at a premium and patients were continuing to turn up. So hence the acute medicine programme was developed. Now, before that, I suppose, just as Mike Prentice would suggest, crisis is the opportunity. The imperative is that the status quo is no longer acceptable. And despite the charms of our dear Taoiseach in trying to convince our bankers of Europe to bail us out in the near future, I don't think this is very much on the cards. So we have to address the problem ourselves with what we have and the resources we have, which are quite honestly significant. We just need to do business in a different way. And hence, that is actually the theme of today's conference: better themes and better outcomes. So, just going back to levers for change, there has been levers for change, but we've just been rather slow in effecting change. For those of you who are not aware of the local hospital structure, CUH is one of the largest hospitals in Ireland. It is the only Trauma 1 centre. It can accommodate 850 beds, but in fact we're now currently down to 670 given our financial crisis and bed numbers cut, etc. We have all the specialties represented in this university hospital, but we had only one entrance of access for this besides outpatients, which is another avenue of access, which is about 10 or 12 patients a day, but not large enough to meet the demand and in an inappropriate way for patient flow to enter the hospital from our point of view. So there was only one avenue, and it's very much akin to having one entrance to Croke Park on match day. So you can appreciate the difficulties we have with patient flow and ensuring process and appropriate assessment and management of the sickest patients who are actually presenting to the hospital. So what do we do about this? As part of the Quality and Clinical Care Directorate under Barry White, several clinical programmes were established, one of these being the acute medicine programme. But I might add that Reconfig here in our local HSE South, along with the Regional Director of Operations, actually began this process of change before the implementation of the acute medicine programme in 2011, in January 2011. So we actually opened our acute medical unit, which is the basic foundation to this programme. This acute medical unit was opened as a phase 1 with a short stay unit. It was a 23-bedded unit, which took direct referrals from GPs by phone following communication with the case manager or the acute physician of the day on the unit. We also, in other words, took all the trolley patients and processed these in quicker time through this unit, and had a very much a team approach to assessment, where you have upskilling of nurses and a very non-hierarchical process on the ward. So much so that patients got appropriate assessment within hours of arrival. They were treated and managed, and they also were fortunate enough to have same-day diagnostics provided on the day. It was very much a different type of culture, promoting, I suppose, an equality service, very much like primary care provides currently. So this unit was for patients who had a predicted length of stay for 48 hours, but of course the flow on didn't happen, and in fact we discharged 90% of those patients. We've a senior decision maker. There was 2 consultants operating this unit. Technically 1.5, as I was also meant to do the 0.5 regional role, but you know, in Ireland you do all things and you're on the floor and you multitask. We also had the benefit of the community intervention team for the elderly, particularly to, in other words, promote faster discharge and ensure that their discharge was safe to the community. And what was the basic aim of this? The basic aim was to promote medical assessment and, in other words, to improve access for primary care for those acutely ill patients that needed urgent care and assessment. Also, we wanted to eliminate the paradigm shift where patients were admitted for investigations. I mean, you might wonder, this is fortunately not happening much more, but still does happen, particularly in relation to MRI. And we wanted to improve the patient flow through the hospital. So with regard to results, we saw 2,400 patients during this year period. We discharged medical to over 2,000 patients, and this was essentially nearly 85% to 90%. The other 10% being those predicted long stayers who were staying longer than at least a week to 14 days, and they were sent up house. But again, there were very few because capacity up house was very small. 48% of these patients were discharged within 48 hours because they were seen the same day, as distinct from the traditional model where a consultant would see them 24 hours later following multiple assessments by junior doctors, already having been seen by very experienced general practitioners. So, in other words, we cut out the so-called middle phase. 25% were discharged within 24 hours, and we had an average length of stay of 61 hours, but this was really predicated on the fact that those who were staying longer in waiting beds up house obviously distorted the mean. We reduced length of stay for the segment what we call general and acute medicine, so that's unselected medicine, from 10.4 days, which was not something to be proud of, but it was because of the unwieldy nature of a tertiary hospital combined with a district general, to 6.5 days for those first 6 months of 2011, and that was consistent throughout the year in 2011. So did we actually have additional resources to effect this change? The only additional resource was in fact a 0.5 of a consultant, as I was a transfer from another service. We didn't have a dedicated NCHD team. We had a rotating registrar, SHO and intern every week from different teams. Which was hardly ideal, but inculcated the kind of culture which we wanted to foster of early assessment and early discharge, and a proactive approach to patient management, which actually the patients really benefited from and actually appreciated, and feedback would suggest that primary care also did. We had 3 additional nursing staff, and this was really in leadership roles to manage the flow from ED and from primary care in the form of a case manager, which is an essential role for this unit to work. And we had a care system for radiology to speed through the throughput of bringing patients to radiology. You might ask, did we have extra beds? No, in fact, we lost beds. So there was actually a saving in the sense that we reduced beds. So, and this was mainly to foster where that ward was up on a major unit on the ward in the main hospital, whereas this was next to the ED, and we wanted to promote the same culture as the ED. So it was an imperative that we were near the so-called acute floor. The capital infrastructure rebuild cost 1.5, so that was a sizable enough. But given the improvements we made and which were to be built on further with the development of the medical assessment unit. So what did this unit actually deliver in the first year? Length of stay was reduced by 2 days. That was sizable enough, and I would suggest that we also improve the quality of care and delivery of care, and that we assess these patients who are the sickest presenting to the front door in a timely and efficient manner. We saved nearly 21,000 bed days, which was the equivalent of 56 beds. So there was an appreciable cost saving, given that it currently costs €1,100 per bed. So what was dearer to the heart of primary care, however, was the assessment area, which, in other words, for patients, they wanted to be seen in a very urgent or semi-urgent manner, rather than sending them to an ED trolley in the casualty. So we opened the medical assessment under duress, I might add, because I didn't have very much extra resources to do this, and we still had 2 physicians, and we had the appointment of 2 further locum physicians to assist us to effect change. But we were there was a continuous presence on the ground, so we were very much a de facto registrar or equivalent general practitioner providing direct care for the patient. So it wasn't very much like previously, consultant-led teams. This was very much a change of practice for consultants, and I think we're perhaps the only unit in the country actually doing this. They've done it in smaller hospitals, but again, they're trying to combine it with specialty practice. But we're just dedicated to the delivery of acute care. Resources, again, minimum. The only thing they actually bought for this is we're currently decanted in an endoscopy unit that has to be commissioned, and that was part of the 1.5 million infrastructure build, I might add. So they bought us 8 trolleys. We got NHD posts from the closure of another hospital and the 2 locum consultant posts. So very minimal resources to effect this type of change. And this was, I might add, all done on the back of increasing activity presenting to the ED departments of in the range of 15 to 20% because of closures and reconfig in our other services around. So there was most definitely increase in activity, and the impact was because of service change. How many patients have we done through this year? We've seen over 5,500. These are consultant episodes in 1 year. And the number of patients to date assessed in medical assessment is 172. We discharge at least 50% of those patients. So on average, we're seeing 26 to 30 inpatients that would normally have been admitted, and we're discharging those. With, I might add, no increase in the readmission rate, and I'm hoping, with improved quality of care. So we've even, in other words, shortened length of stay for the whole of the hospital and saved further bed days. The big thing, which is dearest to my heart, have we actually changed the trolley count? And in fact, we've reduced trolley count during the summer. For 3 months during the summer, there was in fact 0 trolleys. It may look as if we've 5 or 6 there, but they were patients who actually presented in the early hours of the morning and were still counted because it was 8 o'clock. However, due to increased activity, these are now beginning to build again because of capacity restrictions and the moratorium on service delivery up house for whole-time equivalents. So overall, the outcome has improved patient care experience, and I would advocate my primary care colleagues have said the equivalent, with improved efficiency and improved care. So it's a team approach. In summary, we have delivered what we set out to do, and I might add, it is good for patient, it is good for general practice, and it's good for the taxpayer. So in conclusion, overall, I think we have delivered a better outcome for our patients, and I would suggest it's not for the faint-hearted as we proceed further into the future. Many thanks.